Hey everybody, this is Jason Akers with Green Acres Pest Control. I haven't been live in a while and I've been really busy, um, but I'm traveling this weekend and I've gotten to so whenever I travel, I try to do a live stream. It just tends to be pretty easy for me to jump on my iPad and try to answer a few questions. As you can see from the title, we're going to talk about bees and ants and termites, some of the major problems in the summertime weather, springtime weather. I know yesterday was the first day of summer, and so a lot of people have been getting ants. A lot of people are going to start seeing bees. Um, honeybees typically get started this time of year. I know that what I usually recommend people do in a situation of honeybees is to try to get a hold of a beekeeper so they can come out. They will sometimes even come out for free and take your bee nest away. Just ask. Sometimes they have to take things apart on your house, and you may not want them to do that. So, be specific on, what they're going to do and what they're not going to do to take away your honeybees. Because I always recommend uh, trying to, um, like I said, relocate the nest. There are beekeepers that will take the honeybees away for you for free. And so I actually know a guy one time that he had honeybees in his basement. They were actually going in under the edge of his siding above his on his plate, and they were going in and they were not roosting, but nesting between two floor joists. And what the guy did, the beekeeper actually came in with a 5-gallon bucket, slowly pulled the insulation back and shoved the bucket up there, scraped it, plopped the nest in the bucket and put a lid on it, and took the whole nest away. So he was able to relocate the nest without killing the bees. So like I said, I always recommend calling a beekeeper, and because we need honeybees. Honeybees are good for honey. Um, oh, Eric says the volume is really low. It might be. Let's see if that'll make it any better. Um, let's see if I can get my Bluetooth. So I can't be but so loud today. Can everybody else hear me all right? Let me know if I'm coming in all right. Let's see here. This may pause my video for a minute. I'm trying here. I am really trying. Hey, so you can hear me all right, Patrice? As long as I come in, clear enough where people can hear me. Um, I have to talk kind of quiet because my kids are sleeping in the room next door. Let me see if I can get myself a little bit louder for you guys. Let's see chat. There we go. Bill says he can barely hear me too.
I can kind of hear myself in my headset now. All right. So anyway, like I was saying, and be sure to let me know if I'm not coming in clear enough. But what I was saying is that bees, you don't always have to kill. You don't always have to kill honeybees. Typically, you can get a beekeeper to come out and get them for free. Now, there are instances where the bees are just in a spot where nobody can really get to them, and you do have to eliminate them. Now, in Virginia, it is legal to kill honeybees if they're in a position where you really can't get the nest, because they do pose a threat to people. People are allergic to bee stings, so it is important to be able to eliminate them in cases where you can't get rid of them. So sometimes you do have to do that. For example, I have a church that I've had to actually eliminate a nest of bees in this year because there was absolutely no way anyone would be able to get to the nest. You would have had to take off the whole roof of the building just to be able to get to them. So, it does happen from time to time, and you hate to do it, but, sometimes it has to be done. Also, I don't know if I'll be able to do it well here or not, but I wanted to show the difference between ants and termites. A lot of people don't know the difference. So let me do a Google search. Termites. I don't have my desktop which I usually live stream on my desktop so that you guys can see pictures and I can pop them up and I can actually show you like Google image searches and stuff like that. But I want to show you a picture of termites. Now this is a Google image. Let's see if it'll show. Oh wow, that's really crappy. But it's kind of blurry. You see how they've got their wings? There we go. Is that gonna? Ooh, ooh. Nope, that's not really going to do really well. But anyway, one thing about termites a lot of people don't know is termites are not insects. In order to qualify as an insect, they have to have a 3-segmented body and 6 legs. And a termite has a 2-segmented body and 6 legs. So they look like an insect at a glance, but if you get them up close, they have a head and a body. So they don't have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. So they just have the head and the body is all they've got. So that's one way you can tell them apart. Also, a lot of people don't know that cockroaches are not insects either. They actually fall in the same family as termites with both the head and the body. They don't have the 3-segmented body like you do with beetles have 3 segments. I think, now I'm going to have to look that up, make sure. I don't want to give you bad advice. I think that beetles are insects. I know that ants are insects, wasps, bees are insects because they have a 3-segmented body and 6 legs. Oh, yeah. Yes, beetles do have 3 segments. Yeah, I was right. So, yeah, say beetles are insects. But, yeah, a lot of people don't know that roaches aren't insects. Most people categorize them as insects because, they deal with them getting in their houses, and most time people get, bugs in the house. But like spiders aren't insects. Most people know that spiders aren't insects because they have 8 legs, not 6 legs. So that's one way that you can tell termites from ants. If you have swarmers coming out in your house, which is typically the way people will call you, they'll call you up and they'll say, hey, I've got flying ants, or I've got these flying bugs out of my wall. I think they're termites. With this day and age, I have people send me pictures all the time. Of course, I offer free inspections. I'll go out to their house and look for free, But if they can send me a picture, that saves a trip, saves time. A lot of people are willing to send you pictures, and so I'll have people send me pictures all the time. Most of the time, in the spring, it's termites, and in the fall, it's ants. Now, this is in Virginia, and the part of Virginia that I live in, we don't deal with Formosan termites. We deal with eastern subterranean termites. And eastern subterranean termites always swarm typically in the spring. So they'll have swarmers fly out in the house. And I'll tell them, if they have 3-segmented body, it's definitely an ant. If you see that wings are all over the floor, and you have no bugs or very little bugs, but you have wings all over the place, those are termites. Termite wings are actually serrated on the edges like a tear-off coupon that you'd get maybe out of the newspaper, if anybody gets newspaper anymore. But like those little serrated edges, if you look at them underneath a magnifying glass, it actually looks like a serrated edge because the wing of a termite is designed to separate from their body after they swarm up and they mate. They lose their wings. Ants don't. Ants keep their wings the remainder of their life. They keep them forever. So if you notice that the swarmers are coming out and a lot of them are losing their wings, or some of them are just walking around without any wings at all, that's because they're termites. Also, termites will they lose their wings, and there was something else. Now I completely forgot what I was saying. Man, it'll come to me probably. But man, I wish I could remember what I was saying. I'm tired. I just drove 3.5 hours. I have bed bugs to do up here in Northern Virginia, and I typically do travel over the weekends when I do my bed bugs over the state of Virginia, something that I offer. Must be a huge deal dealing with termites. They're not that bad, honestly, Patrice. Or Patrice.
Yeah, well, we don't have to tent either in Virginia.
No, we don't tent because we don't deal with Formosans or drywood termites. And so if they were, drywood termites, then yeah, you do have to tent those. I've actually seen some pretty severe drywood termite damage down in Florida. 15 years in pest control, and I've never seen a bumblebee nest. Do they even exist? Yes, they do. I dealt with a bumblebee nest last year. Um, without images, without Google Images, which this is not going to let me do any images, but bumblebees, they're practically harmless. They're not aggressive, really, at all. I've never been stung by bumblebees. They do sting, but I've never been stung by them. They look a lot like ground bees. If you've ever seen ground bees or trench bees, cicada killers, they're kind of like those. I actually saw a nest of them in the ground last year, and it looked like somebody had stood back and just shot little holes all over the ground. You Google search bumblebees in the ground, and you'll see they make little bitty holes all over the ground, and they go into the ground, and they'll swarm out. And they were bumblebees, absolutely bumblebees. But if you've ever seen a carpenter bee and you know what a carpenter bee looks like, a lot of people will misidentify carpenter bees for bumblebees because a bumblebee is about half the size of a carpenter bee. And they look a lot similar to carpenter bees. And so that's how you can tell the difference. A bumblebee is about, let's see, I had a quarter. Let me sit this right here. Try not to get my wife in the picture because she's sitting here relaxing in the bed. All right. There we go. Here's a nickel. That's about the size of a bumblebee. That's how big they are. That's how long they are. It's about the width of a nickel. So that's how big a bumblebee is. A carpenter bee is about that big. Just to give you an idea of the difference in size between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee. So bumblebees are smaller than carpenter bees by quite a bit. And carpenter bees usually, if you find carpenter bees around, a lot of times they get into azalea bushes. They love to pollinate azaleas. They like to pollinate roses sometimes, but typically they get into like the butterfly bushes. If you ever get those around, I always call them butterfly bushes. Butterflies get all over them, or the azaleas, and they will. They're usually nearby holes that they've drilled, whether it's on a deck, pressure-treated lumber. They love pressure-treated lumber. If someone's just recently put in a new deck with pressure-treated lumber, the carpenter bees will love to drill that stuff all to pieces. Pat says, I do a lot of work for the schools. Oh, man, my chat likes to disappear on me. Okay. I do a lot of work for the schools in my area. I'm licensed in Canada, Ontario, and Ottawa region. I admit I struggle with ground bees as they do have, this is really irritating how this thing wants to hide my chat. As they don't have a visible nest, a psychic. Oh yeah, psychic. I just had a thing in my email for that stuff. Somebody's having that stuff go on sale here now. I don't use psychic. It's cypermethrin. I typically use demon, and cypermethrin is a repellent. It's a synthetic pyrethroid, so it's naturally a repellent. But with ground bees, it depends on what you're calling a ground bee. If you've got yellow jackets, is it cyfluthrin? Is that what psychic is? For some reason, I thought it was cypermethrin. I know cypermethrin is a repellent. I don't trust many synthetic pyrethroids at all at being non-repellents. They like to try to claim that bifenthrin is a non-repellent. Yes, demon is cypermethrin. That's right. But the thing about like bifenthrin, they try to claim bifenthrin, which is in most pesticides people buy nowadays, like in home defense, Bifen is one, but it's actually just bifenthrin. It's Talstar is bifenthrin. I remember when they first came out with bifenthrin, they tried to replace diazinon with bifenthrin, and diazinon is known to be a non-repellent for ants. And so they marketed bifenthrin as a non-repellent for ants. But I have found that bifenthrin repels ants horribly. It is not good for ants. If the ants are coming in the house from outside, you might be able to get away with using something like Talstar or Bifen or something with bifenthrin in it. But I have found that bifenthrin is one of the worst things to use for ants. I've used it. It's driven them into other rooms of the house. It's driven them out into the middle of the floor where people are, constantly walking over them, stepping on them. They're crawling on people while they're trying to eat at a dinner table. I've a lot of the synthetic pyrethroid family of pesticides are just really highly repellent for ants. They may work on things like, I think imidacloprid works best for ants, to tell you the truth, Chris. And imidacloprid is what's in Temprid. You can use Temprid for ants, and I think that would work better than cyfluthrin, mainly because it's a synthetic pyrethroid. Anything that's got that that patented THRIN on the end is something that I don't really trust for ants at all. And that's ever since they tried to market bifenthrin as a non-repellent when it's really not. It actually causes a lot more problems than it's worth. It's better not to even use it. I use it on a repellent basis around the outside for spiders and things like that. It works really good. But most synthetic pyrethroids are excellent on spiders. Spiders aren't that hard to kill, really, truthfully, as long as you use a synthetic pyrethroid. But when it comes to ants, you're better off using something like Temprid or, if it's outside, you can use, Termitor or something like that on ants, especially like carpenter ants, acrobat ants, things like that. And, baits help. But the problem with baits, this is the biggest problem that I have with baits, and this is something that they teach you too when you go and you get that, is that baiting for ants. The problem with baiting for ants is you have to rotate your baits. And there's only so many baits you can choose from. Because ants, the nest is 6 months. So if your reproductives are in the nest and they're living in the nest for 6 months, the workers are carrying the food back and they're feeding it to the reproductives. If the workers realize that the bait is killing the reproductives, they'll stop taking the bait. So then you have to use something different. So every month or every 2 weeks to a month, you're having to constantly rotate your baits out. Because if you don't, the workers will come back. They will mark the bait with pheromones that will warn the rest of the colony, look, this is poisonous. This is killing ants. We can't take this. This is killing ants. So when you're using baits for ants, I find that you're better off just using something like a boric acid bait and using liquid insecticide. Taurus. Yeah, Taurus is just Pimpernel. That's all Taurus is. It's the same thing as Termitor, just cheaper. It's generic. But Termitor is really good for ants as far as outside treatment. But it's but baits. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true, Chris. Baits will, but if they decide they don't want it, they won't go after it anymore. That's the thing about baits, is that if they have deemed that the bait is not worth eating, it's like if you go to a restaurant and you get food poisoning, you can drive by the restaurant every day. You're not going to go in it if you know you got food poisoning there. So, you have that adverse effect from baits. And so I don't really put a lot of faith into baits. I use a lot of dusts because they don't recognize dusts. And if you apply them properly, they're very effective. And I use liquid insecticide, and I usually get rid of them within 6 months, sometimes less. Sometimes with one treatment. If you, like today, I did an ant job on the way to Northern Virginia, and it was acrobat ants. Now those things are awful. Acrobat ants and odorous house ants, they're both just horrible. They were going into a column outside of a door, and you can dust in that column. And if you can get dust to hit the ants right on the nest, you're going to kill the ants. And even if you don't kill them, if you get it close enough to the entrance of the nest, they're going to travel back and forth through it, pick it up, and through static electricity, they're going to carry it into the nest, and they're going to kill the reproductives in the nest just because they're communicating back and forth because they're social. And so that's the way that a dust works. I feel that dust works better because they don't actually have to eat it. They just have to walk through it. And if you apply it in a way that it's so thin that they don't notice it for what it is, they'll crawl through it and it works really well. At least that's in my own expertise. That's what I've noticed anyway. I wish my chat would not disappear. I wish there was an option, chat viewing options, so it would not disappear. Would you use a dust for pharaoh ants? Yeah, I would. If they were going into the wall, that's where you need to use your dust, is in the wall, around like baseboards, behind baseboards, places where it's not going to be blown away or vacuumed up. That's the thing. You can't leave just dust just laying out. I actually had a lady that told me that she had a big complaint against an exterminator locally, her local exterminator, is that he went into her kitchen. Now, he was dusting for roaches, and he spilled dust on the floor, and he just kind of smeared it around and didn't even clean it up. That's kind of Delta dust. Which dust do you use? Delta dust, Tempo? I use Delta dust some, and Alpine. That's what I use. But yeah, she was complaining about, poor application, exactly. Well, what happened was he was holding the duster and it spilled out. If you hold your duster upside down and it spills out through the spout, it'll get all over the place. It's easy to do that when you're filling it. If you're not holding it right, it'll sometimes tip and pour out the end. And so the type of duster he was using, yeah. So, but she was complaining and said, I just don't. He wasn't a bad exterminator. He just didn't have experience. And he ended up getting rid of her cockroaches just fine, but he had to clean up the bait. He just didn't do a very good job. You have to get at it with a mop or something. Get at least some paper towels and wet some paper towels and get that stuff up off the floor. You can't be leaving pesticide all over someone's floor, especially someone who's already afraid of pesticide. She came and asked me, so it's obvious that she was worried about the situation she was in. But anyway, I think that's about. I can't stay on very long tonight. My wife's already falling asleep beside me. Hey, you going to sleep?
I'm resting, that's for sure.
See, she's going to sleep. She's resting, that's for sure. We had a long trip. It's 3.5 hours up here. But that's what you do when you go statewide for bed bugs. So, well, I appreciate it, Pat. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad that I can help you out. Just let me know if there's any questions you have. I'm more than happy to do a video on anything you have a question about. If I have to do my own research, I research stuff if I don't understand it. I remember when ladybugs, I'm in Woodbridge. Yeah, I'm up here. I have a bed bug job in Woodbridge Sunday. I do bed bugs up here. So I have one in Woodbridge. I have 2 in Chantilly to do Sunday. So what works best for moles? If you get yourself a good dog that'll dig them up and kill them, they're the best thing for moles. Honestly, moles are really difficult because they eat grubs, but they will also eat earthworms. So in a year where you have a lot of rain, the earthworms will feed moles. Even if you treat the yard for grubs and kill the grubs, earthworms can still feed moles. So baits are, that talprid worms. Have you even had results? Because I had the guy try to sell me those things, and he even right out admitted it's a 50-50 chance the moles would even eat them. And that's about the same as any kind of mole bait that you can get at, Tractor Supply or somewhere you can get and bait for moles. You have to hit that main. The problem is with moles is you have to hit that main tunnel. Moles, they're like, she's going to start snoring, and y'all going to hear her snoring. She will. She snores like a tractor. It sounds like a tractor breaking down, dead serious. She's going to start snoring here, and I'm going to have to turn this off if she starts snoring.
Try not to fall.
But anyway.
I'm pregnant.
Yeah, she's pregnant. Yeah. But anyway, a mole, imagine a tree trunk. And so the tree trunk goes up and it branches off into all these branches. Moles will still travel that main trunk. And they'll travel these branches looking for food, and then they'll come back to that main trunk. And the trick is baiting the main tunnel that they're using, figuring out which one's the main tunnel and which one's a branch. Because some of the branches they never go back into. And so if you're baiting those branches, you're not going to kill your mole. So you've got to figure out what their main tunnel is. And that's why it usually for moles, if you treat the yard for grubs, you can, well, see, mole tunnels will cave in and smoke bombs won't work for moles. You're better off using smoke bombs for things like groundhogs, woodchucks, things like that if you're trying to chase those things out. But that's going to only work really in the evening hours because groundhogs will go out during the day looking for food and stuff, and they won't necessarily be in a burrow unless they've got babies or something like that down in there, and you may not chase the babies out at all. So yeah, but moles you won't really get a real good result with smoke bombs in a mole burrow, especially if someone's walked across and caved in a tunnel or something and they haven't come back through yet. But see, that's the thing about mole tunnels is you have to. I have gotten the best results treating the yard for grubs. You can get granulated pesticide at Lowe's or Home Depot or somewhere like that and bait your yard for grubs.
But then, like, if you do kill a mole, the problem is that another one's likely to
Right,
come back in.
exactly. That's they did a really good study on moles. I think it may have been Bear, I think, that did it, but they went out and they gathered up moles in the yard in this certain area where there were moles, and they found that within 20 to 30 minutes, a new mole would move in. They're very territorial, and they'll kill one another. So the moles, they would get the mole, they would catch the mole, take it back and put it in a bucket. They would go out and catch another mole, bring it back, put it in the same bucket, and they'd kill each other. So they found that they were very territorial, but also they were so territorial that when another mole would leave the territory, like if they captured it and took it away, a new one would move in and recolonize that same mole tunnel. So within 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, their sense of smell is that intense that they can tell when another mole is gone, and they will move into their territory. So that's another thing about moles. They're really difficult. It's easier just to kill their food source. And Japanese beetles. Japanese beetles are going to be the same thing. Just treat the yard, treat around where the grubs are before they hatch out in the spring. When the Japanese beetles come out in the spring and summer, you want to make sure you kill the grubs before they come out, before they emerge. And that's going to cut down on your Japanese beetles, but you're going to have to do that like every year, probably 3 or 4 years in a row before you eliminate the Japanese beetle population. And even then, if they're going after like roses or rhododendrons, something like that, and they're destroying it, they're going to come from the neighbors. The biggest problem, see, that's the issue with both moles, mosquitoes, Japanese beetles, anything that comes in from the yard. If you're not treating the whole neighborhood, which is why they go through in real bad areas like Chickateague, several areas up north. I know Chickateague does it, but they'll drive through and they'll still fog like they used to with DDT. They fog the whole entire neighborhood for mosquitoes because just one person alone killing mosquitoes at their house, it's not going to stop the mosquitoes from coming from other yards to bite them. And so that's the way it works with moles. That's the way it works with mosquitoes. Any kind of bugs that are going to come from someone else's yard, like Japanese beetles and things like that, they're going to come from someone else's yard. Not everybody's going to treat their yard. Does Bear Advanced Rose Care work? Is it cooperative? I probably would kill the beetles when they got on the roses. Yeah, it would kill the beetles. But the trick to getting rid of Japanese beetles is to kill the grubs in the ground. They're a lot like cicadas, where the cicada has a larva that crawls in the earth. And if you kill the grub, the larva that's in the earth, before it becomes a beetle, that stops the beetle. That's why it's not the beetle. You're killing the stage before it becomes a beetle. So that's why you treat the yard early. And the biggest problem with being in pest control and convincing people that they have a problem before they have a problem, like with beetles, you tell them, look, if you don't treat your yard now, you're going to have Japanese beetles. Remember last year when you had Japanese beetles? Remember how they eat your rose bushes? We need to treat now so we can get, stink bugs are the same way. Exactly. Yep. That's right. You need to treat now before they're a problem. Otherwise, they'll become a problem. So it's really difficult to explain to people. Like when the stink bugs swarm, they swarm typically after it starts to get cold, usually September. But if you start treating for stink bugs in August, a lot of your customers that get stink bugs stop getting stink bugs. They just don't get them. If you treat them at the right time of the year, I get stink bugs. I get stink bugs really, really, really bad. But if I treat them in like July, August, it eliminates my problem almost 100%. I mean, I might get one or two, but they're not that bad at all.
We get hundreds.
Yeah, we get thousands.
Yeah.
We get thousands if we don't treat. Yeah, that's right, Pat. Customers usually don't believe it until they see it. You know, I actually, a lot of times, I will offer cheaper service. I will give a discount service for things like stink bugs, yard treatments, things like that. If I can get it done early and I know it's going to do the job and it's going to get me good PR, it's going to, teach the customer something new that, next year, get me early again, it'll work better. That is worth a discount because then they'll tell their friends and family, oh yeah, hey, this guy, he knew what he was doing. He came in here and I haven't had any more problems anymore because he comes early, But some people are fine with early service. Most people aren't. Most people, like you said, they don't see the problem until it's already a problem. Which really they could have eliminated it completely if they listened to you. Someone help, my cat has fleas and they keep coming back. You need to treat your cat. What is that stuff you use to treat your cats with? It was an Advantage.
No, it's Revolution.
Revolution.
It's by prescription only, though.
Yeah, well, most of them are.
And you
but,
need to explain why not to use the collars.
Oh, yeah. This is one thing. I ought to do a video on that. I need to do a video on flea collars and why you should not use a flea collar on your cat or your dog. If you're using flea collars, the flea collar, they can chew them off and it can kill them. I actually had a neighbor whose dog died because it chewed the collar off. It was left alone, and dogs, when they're left alone, they get bored, and he scratched and he pulled the collar up over his mouth, chewed it, broke it, and then chewed the collar, and the poison, chemical, because it's pesticide that's in the collar, got in his mouth, killed the dog. So you'll want to be really careful using flea collars. They're typically either not strong enough or they're too strong, and they'll make your pet sick. What is going on here? Okay. But dogs that continuously get fleas or cats that continuously get fleas, the reason they're continuing to be a problem is it's probably because they're coming from outside. If you have a lot of wildlife coming through your yard, like deer, squirrels, rabbits, even mice can bring fleas into your yard. If the fleas are getting in the yard, and then even if the dogs are indoor only, not just outdoors, but even if they're only indoor pets, I've had only indoor pets, but because I go and I treat homes with fleas, I always have the likeliness that I can bring a couple in on my pants, shirt. They'll get into the cuff of your pant leg. They may not even bite you, but they'll just hitch a ride on your clothing. They jump off and then they get on your pet, and then your pet has fleas. You can bring them in from your yard. If you have a lot of wildlife come through your yard, you can bring them from the yard. If you're continuously having problems with fleas in the house and you can't seem to get rid of them on your cat, or the flea chemical that you're treating your cat with is getting rid of them temporarily and then they come back, it's probably because you're bringing them in from another source, usually your yard. You can treat your yard. You can treat your yard with granules. You can get there's like a liquid spray they make, it goes on the end of a water hose, kind of like they do with Roundup, where you can spray the yard and it will treat your yard for the fleas. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you cut your grass all the way low to the ground, as low as you can get it, and then that same day, treat your yard. If you have to use granules, if you can't find the liquid applicator and you have to use granules, then you want to spray your yard with water hose after you apply the granules, and that will kill the fleas. And you'll want to do that as often as the label will allow. If the label says that you can apply your granules every 2 weeks, do it every 2 weeks. If it says to do it once a month, do it once a month. and that will keep your fleas down so they quit coming in on your dog and your cat. And once you kill them in the yard, it's a lot easier to keep them out of the yard, because then it's just a matter of eliminating wildlife. Like if you've got deer coming in the yard, you could always put up a fence, or you just treat the yard once a year, and that'll cut down on your ticks and your fleas and stuff coming in on your pets. But more than likely, if you keep getting fleas on your cat and they keep coming back, it's because they're coming from the yard. At least that's what I've found anyway. It could be that they're in the house. If your cat is going to a place in the house like you don't go, like maybe down into the basement where you don't travel a whole lot to, or if the cats are going under the bed and you're not treating under the bed, then the cat will pick up the fleas from under the bed. How do you feel about bifenthrin sand granules applied quarterly? If you're going to do granules, quarterly is the way to go. Honestly, I don't have a lot of faith in granules since they took Durazban and Diazinon out of the granules. They don't last as long. They're not as effective. I don't typically do granules unless it's a quarterly service. And the reason I do them on a quarterly service is because quarterly customers tend to have a lot more bug issues than monthly customers or bi-monthly customers, especially monthly customers. I mean, monthly customers just don't get bugs. You know what I mean. When you go to a monthly customer account and you're telling your customer, or you're asking them, have you had any bugs? For them to say, yes, I've had bugs is rare. When you're going to a quarterly account, they typically always have something they've seen. And so I always use granules on a quarterly account, always. And more than likely, you're just not treating often enough. If the fleas continue to come back, they're probably, see, I have monthly. The way my contracts work, Chris, is I offer discounts over monthly customers because I feel that monthly does a better job. If you're coming once a month, the chemical, most MSDS or SDS, whatever they're calling them now, will actually state that the chemical is only going to be effective for 30 days. That's a problem with quarterly accounts, because if you've got a quarterly account, then that's 90 days. So 60 of those days you have no pesticides at all. It's not going to kill anything. Even though the label may specifically state on the label that it will be effective for 90 days, if you read the SDS, a lot of times it actually states on the SDS that it's really only the most effective for the first 30 days, even though the label will say 90 days. And so I typically just apply once every 30 days, and that's what I advise people to do. That's what I guarantee. If I go to a house and somebody actually pays me to come once a month, I guarantee pest control. If they have a problem with bugs between visits, I don't charge them anything. I go back, I treat it for free, because it's probably something I've missed, because the chemicals are really working the best in the first 30 days. Now, when it stretches into every other month or every 3 months, I typically do upcharge between visits if I have to come back, and I tell them right up front, look, the chemical's only good for 30 days. If you have problems after the 30 days, this is why. Some people just don't like chemicals. Some people don't care. It could be that they have a mouse problem. It could be that they've got, problems that you can control on a quarterly basis. And so in those instances, I recommend quarterly. Most of the time I don't. Most of the time I always recommend monthly pest control. And it's typically cheaper in the long run when you really think about it. If you have a quarterly customer, and it's a discounted rate typically over quarterly, it's cheaper than if they pay 12 months than if they pay 4 months out of the year. But the problem is, in those in-between visits, if you're having to come back and you're charging your customer like I do for an extra trip, then they end up paying more than a regular monthly customer. And so it's actually cheaper to just have monthly pest control, and it's going to do a better job. And that's the way I sell my work. That's the way I've always sold my work for over 30 years now. I mean, I haven't been selling for 30 years. I've been selling for 20 years. But that's the way I've always sold my work, is based on a monthly program. And even back with Durazban and Diazinon, it just works better. Yeah, and you're in and out a lot quicker. If you're doing a monthly pest control service, it takes you like 5-10 minutes. If you're doing a quarterly service, it takes like a half hour to 45 minutes, because you're working so much harder because you've got so many more problems you're having to deal with. But if you're doing a monthly pest control and they just don't have problems, you're going and you're eliminating what few bugs try to get in, you're eliminating them and they're gone. And so they just don't ever have a problem. And you have the satisfaction rate. The thing about monthly customers is the satisfaction is so high and they're so pleased and they keep you forever. I mean, you look at other business models. Take business model, for example. You've got everybody that makes the most income sells monthly. Your power company, your phone company, the cable company, your cell phone companies, they all have people on a monthly contract. And monthly contracts are just better. And in pest control, as far as like income, they're better, but they're also better for the customer. They're what the customer needs. Even if the customer doesn't want it, it's what the customer needs. If they've got problems with spiders breed like once a month. Roaches breed once a month. Ants are constantly fighting to get into the house every month. Most bugs come in every single month. Now, with crickets, you can get away with crickets like twice a year because they typically only come in the spring and the fall. When the temperature gets cool at night, they come in. Oriental cockroaches are the same way. They come in typically when the weather gets cool, they come in the spring and in the fall. But that's like two. Or mice. You know, mice are, you can get away with mice on the quarterly. But when it comes to like ants, silverfish, earwigs, man, I could name centipedes, millipedes, all kinds of bugs. They're monthly occurrence. They're going to constantly come in. If you do monthly contracts, you have less problems and people are happier. But that's just in my experience. I find that people are a lot happier. The quarterly customers are the ones that more likely are going to complain. So, because they're having problems, they're paying you to get rid of their problem, and I understand why they're complaining. Because, if it were me and I was paying my money to get rid of the pest control, then I am slapping you every time you snore. You know that, right? Because if they don't, you'd probably be annoyed if they heard you go. I'm going to have to get off here, y'all. She's trying to go to sleep. I'm keeping her awake. Y'all have a good night.
I don't really want to be sawing logs on YouTube either.
No, you don't. All right. Well, I got on here to tell y'all some stuff about ants and roaches and fleas. And I mean, I went way off. Bees, ants, and termites. I talked about them, and I talked about a whole bunch of other stuff, too. You guys have a real great night. If you have any suggestions, wait, please answer, please. Okay, hold on. Let me see what Maple has to say, and then I got to leave. All right. Maple says, I can't afford the monthly pest control. What should I do?
It depends on what she's having problems with.
No, it's fleas.
Oh, it's fleas.
I treat a home once for fleas. I do. And if you don't get rid of fleas in 21 days, it takes 21 days to eliminate an infestation of fleas. If the customer needs me to come back after day 21, now they have a week to call me after day 21. If they don't call me in that week, I charge the same price as it was originally. Otherwise, it's half price to spray again. Literally, like, I might have one flea job a year I have to go back on. I use Alpine WSG. Let me type that in here, if it will let me. How do I do this? I don't know how to do this. I can't do it. All right, you can still get Alpine WSG. Alpine is really good for fleas. You can treat with Alpine WSG. It is labeled for fleas. It is really good for fleas. And if you're really having a problem, you can mix Nigard in with the Alpine. It's a growth regulator, and it does help with fleas. That's what I've noticed, and it works really well. How much do you charge for termite treatment? Depends on the termites. But Ontario, you should be able to get Alpine in Ontario. You might not. I know that I had a lady that contacted me that could not get Crossfire in Canada, but you may be able to get Alpine in Canada. See, that's what I use for fleas. I use Alpine for fleas. It works really, really good. I don't know if Temprid is labeled for fleas. Someone else here may be able to tell. Yeah, I've heard of Precor, but the reason that I like Alpine is because it's a neonicotinoid and they're really good for all kinds of bugs, and it really works good on fleas. But you can use Alpine as a broadcast treatment over the entire floor in the house. But you want to pick everything up off the floor. You want to treat your whole floor. The carpets, if you can pull up an area rug, pull it up, treat under it, lay it back down, treat the top of it. You want to do this for bath mats. You pull the bath mat off the floor, treat under the bath mat, lay the bath mat down, treat the bath mat, treat everything. Be out of the house for 3 hours. Let all the chemical dry. If you come in the house and it's still wet, leave. Don't come back in the house till the chemical's dry, and then come back in the house. Don't treat your beds. You don't need to treat your beds. Wash your comforters, wash your sheets. You don't treat the bed, but you treat the whole floor. Treat under the bed. Take stuff out from underneath the bed, put on top of the bed. Treat the floor under the bed. Anywhere cats will go, you will need to treat those areas. Even if you don't think the cat's been there, treat those areas. But as far as Ontario, I really don't know what kind of chemicals you can get in Canada. I know that they don't sell Alpine up there. I mean, not Alpine, but Crossfire, because someone specifically told me they could not buy it. But this was in Toronto. But you guys, good luck, and I hope I've helped. So, see y'all later. In stream.